back to another week of Carry the G in MKE. I'm Aaron Nagler, Cheesehead TV, talking with Camille Davis once again after the Packers drop a very frustrating game to the Atlanta Falcons. Poor Camille. We legit just got online and we just said hello, and I almost started ranting, and I was like, we got to save it for the pod. I'm so sorry to jump all over it right out of the gate. I hope you had a lovely weekend, Camille,
I
outside of the
did.
Packers.
Outside of the Packers, the weekend was pretty good, so I
All
can't
right.
complain too much there.
There you go. It was a very frustrating game, and I think you pretty much nailed it right before we started recording. The victory's right there.
In
It's right
hand,
there.
in
Just take
hand.
it. Just take it.
It was a game where you're watching it, and third quarter, you're like, wow, like man. First of all, you're like Jordan Love really shows up in the third quarter, like they're
Yeah, it
showing his
does.
stats between
Right.
this game and then the game in Chicago, and you're just
Yep.
like, wow, like yes, like victory is here, like we got a 12-point lead. All we
We're
got to do
cooking.
is hold on in the fourth quarter,
Oh,
and we
man.
walk away out of Atlanta with a big dub, going 2-0. And I was even thinking ahead of myself, going like,
Yep.
okay,
Yep.
look, the Vikings lost. Chicago's about to lose. At the time, I was like, okay, the Lions are
Seahawks are beating up on Detroit. Like,
exactly.
we're
So
going
I
to
was like,
take
man,
control of the division.
this win. I was like, it's early. A lot of
Yeah,
football
a
stuff to be
lot
played.
of ball game left. No
So it
doubt.
was like to get an early lead in the division. I was like,
Right.
this could be outstanding. It didn't work out that way. So that was disappointing to say at the very least.
Let's rewind, all right? Because it's real easy now after the fact because the game was so close and because of the way they pretty much gave it up there in the fourth quarter to forget the fact that heading into the game, it's so funny. Like, you get a few nicks and bruises, you get a couple of players down, and man, my mentions are just filled with people doom and gloom, like they're going to lose by 20, blah, blah, blah. What was your mindset heading into the game? Because it was interesting to see people who were very kind of up and positive after the Bears victory to suddenly with the news that, Aaron Jones and Christian Watson weren't going to go and then David Bakhtiari's out. Man, the vibe really shifted really quick. What was your mindset going into the game?
I mean, we all have to acknowledge the fact that the Bears still suck.
True.
So,
Fair.
you
Fair.
know, one of my favorite parts from Technical Foul this past week was my co-host Tim lighting into our Bears fan on the podcast, and he was like, "Just because you guys got better doesn't mean you don't still suck." And I was like, "That's a
Right.
bar, like that." Yes, like
Truly.
they made some progress for sure. So it's like you look at that win against the Bears, and they 18-point win. So you're like, okay, if they're a bad team, you did what you're supposed to do against
Exactly.
the bad team.
Right.
And going into the game against Atlanta, I was telling some of my friends, like, yo, Atlanta's a little bit better than I think some people are giving them credit for. I know their division was a mess last year as well, and you don't know what to make of them. I was like, but the running game there is real.
Mm-hmm.
And going into the game, I was like, it's going to be a tough one. They're a good younger team. I was like, the Packers, good young team. It should be a good game. Uh, I saw the line changing. Then the Packers were becoming the
That was
underdog.
interesting, right?
And I was like, that's fascinating. And then we
Yeah.
get to game day and you see some of these injuries. I did not expect to see David Bakhtiari out. So immediately I was just kind of like, yikes, like that's a big one. We all
It's
know how important.
significant, no doubt.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
left tackle, we know how important that position is. And I thought back to saying, like, well, it's a good thing the Packers have some offensive line depth, because some teams you take out their starting left tackle and everything's going to fall to crap. The Packers, I thought, at least would be able to withstand it throughout this game to a certain degree. So
And I
the
think they
mindset
did.
going into it,
I think they did. As
they
far
did.
as between Rasheed Walker and Josh Nijman, I think they found a way of working. That's a great point in the sense that the Packers, unlike most teams, do have
Mm-hmm.
depth at tackle, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of teams, if they lose their starting left tackle, especially the former All-Pro, probably fall apart and or have to change their approach quite a bit on offense. It didn't look materially different than what we saw in
No.
Week 1, as far as okay, there are going to be times some of these dropbacks where we're going to leave him one-on-one, and I thought Walker was definitely up and down, but for the
Yes.
most part, they could run their offense.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case when you got backup linemen in there. And
Exactly. Like
kind
there
of the
was
same thing when Newman came in for Jenkins. I mean, I don't think he
that
was
was the
lights out,
one.
but that was scary in the moment where I'm thinking, oh, God, here we go. But Newman held up okay, too.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, they weren't perfect, like you were mentioning. They
Right.
definitely had some lapses there in their play, but for the most part, the Packers were able to execute the way that they wanted to execute. So I'm watching, I'm like, this is a winnable game. Like didn't go into it like we're absolutely going to beat Atlanta. I just felt it was a winnable game.
Yep.
And the way they played throughout it showed me that it was a winnable game. And by the time we get to the fourth quarter, I'm feeling pretty good. Like we just got to close out. And then things started to fall apart. 13 unanswered points. Offense can't get a first down. Everything that you would hope not happened
Right.
In that moment. And then I even saw like the little blurb from the Packers social media team that Lucas Van Ness was out for the rest of the game with an elbow injury. So I was like, I hope that's not too serious, along with Elgin's injury. Mm-hmm. And then you think back. You're thinking back to if Ja would have just caught that interception.
Oh, or the Quay Walker interception. Or so many missed tackles. And there are a lot of what ifs. A lot of what ifs on the defensive side.
Yeah, and that's the piece that is so interesting to me when I reflect on this game, because, a lot of the narrative was, hey, this is a young team. These types of L's are going to happen. And that is true. I'm not tripping off the fact that Packers lost. It's just interesting how they lost, because you would have thought that without Bakhtiari, with Elgin going down, without Aaron Jones, without Christian Watson, that the offense would be the problem. But they were still able to put up 24 points, and it still happened to be an L. So it was a game where I thought the defense would show a little more, and was disappointed that they didn't.
Yeah, it's interesting. Heading into this game, it's nothing that I can't imagine. It's nothing the Packers didn't expect as far as Atlanta's offensive approach, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to run the ball. They're going to feature those two backs. They know they have to limit what they ask Ritter to do, which I think they did. And the Packers gave him his first interception ever in his NFL career. Should have had two more. Yep. So it's like, it's so obvious that the Packers can play a pretty high level of defense if and when they have a lead and the team across from them gets into, oh gosh, we have to throw it now mode, right? They're kind of built for that. We saw that especially last week against the Bears, but I think pretty much over Joe Barry's tenure, it's been, okay, if we can cook with four guys up front, right, when they're dropping back consistently, we're going to flood the end with coverage, and we're probably going to get a pick or two, or we're going to make a play on the ball, what have you. Well, the Falcons didn't want to play to that script, and I don't think the Packers should have expected them to, but it sure felt like, to your point, they got up 12 in the fourth, and they thought, okay, we're going to play a light box, we're going to play coverage, and Atlanta was just like, thanks, we're just going to keep running the ball. Because that's who they are. Like it just seemed like a complete lack of awareness from Joe Barry and company, and that's what's frustrating.
I think that's a fair point to have, because, again, they spent the top 10 draft pick on a running back, and in this day and age,
you got to think they're going to use him.
Exactly. And we saw early on how effective he was throughout the entire first half. The score wasn't ever such that a 12-point lead, that's that's two possessions. So it was never so much out of the question where it's like, okay, I expect Atlanta to just throw the ball now to catch up, especially when you saw how effective the run game was. If you can get, 8 yards on a carry,
then
living. It's not going to be a part of your game. It's going to be
And that's the whole problem in the second half especially, but kind of for the game on defense. It's, look, there are players that got to make plays. They're in position to make plays, right? Whether it is the obvious ones like dropped interceptions, or even if it's just, okay, I'm supposed to be the fill guy, and I'm supposed to be there off of a stunt, what have you. I'm in the hole. I got to make that tackle, or at least slow the ball carrier down. But the problem for the Packers was they had no idea what to key on, because the Falcons kept living in second and third and short. And if you're a play caller, that's the dream. Mm-hmm. I mean, you talk about paper cuts. They paper cut them to death. They ran 78 plays yesterday. 78 plays, Camille. That's way too many plays. And that's the other thing. When you're on the field that long, and this is where the lack of complementary football comes in, like, you're going to get tired. Those guys are sucking wind at the end of that game, and they're still being the ball is still being shoved down their throats. They couldn't stop it when they were, like, healthy and just off the bus and totally ready for a game. You could flash, forward to the fourth quarter, and the hands on knees and hands on hips, and the Atlanta's going to keep running the ball. And it just was just so odd how the Packers didn't seem in any way interested in countering that, not in any meaningful way.
I mean, they didn't, and then also when they got a chance to stop it, they couldn't touch them. Yeah. So that's the other.
There is that as well.
Where it's like Robinson. going into, I was like, he's going to be an explosive runner. I understand that.
Right.
Saw how he was juking Carolina defenders out their shoes last week.
Yep.
You go into the game like hope it's not my guys who were getting juked out. You
Well,
know,
you hope for some rallies, tackling a bunch of carriers to a bunch of guys to the ball carrier. You know what I mean? Like where you're hoping you avoid those
hmm
one-on-one moments, but you're going some of those are going to
it's
arise.
going to
Obviously,
happen
it's
from
going to
time to time.
happen.
It's going to. And then you saw moments in the game where they were rallying to the ball carrier, and you're like,
Yes.
yes, that's what I'm talking about. More of this. But it's like Robinson is so shifty. If you miss one tackle, he is able to get up the
Go.
field quickly, and
Yep.
he doesn't waste a lot of time like dancing around. He's trying to figure out where to get to. He's using his steps and his space very, very diligently. Like he's not wasting energy. He has a mission
Yeah,
to
he
get to
does.
that first down marker or that end zone, and he's going for it. I mean, he's a good running back,
I mean, he's amazing. He's amazing. He's a great talent, and the fact that that's only his second NFL game
right?
is scary for the rest of the league. Let's flip it around to the Packers running back situation.
Oh
The
boy.
fact that Aaron Jones doesn't play in this game, okay, we all saw the hammy in Chicago, so I pretty much didn't expect him to. But man, they need better from AJ. I love AJ as a dude. I really think his rookie year, especially, he's
Mhm.
shown that he can do it. But man, I don't know what's up. I don't know what's up with. There are times where he does lower his shoulder and get those hard yards. You certainly saw a handful of plays like that yesterday, but there's way too many plays where, man, you're a bigger guy. Why are you going low and losing your balance consistently and not just plowing through guys in short yardage rather than, I guess, trying to dive under the pile? I don't know, man. Like the AJ thing is curious to me.
It's it's unfortunate. I'll say this because to me it felt like there were some people there. Let me rewind it and say this.
Mhm.
There are some people who care about being right so much
Oh my gosh, yes.
that they will celebrate them being right even if it's at the detriment to a team that they are supposedly cheering for.
Supposedly, right. Yes.
So
Yeah.
I've seen all the AJ Dillon, conversation. And
Right.
I was thinking like, yes, he had a down year last year. This is a chance for him to bounce back. So you were hoping, at least I was hoping, one as a Packers fan, just I like AJ Dillon to be like, hey, this is
Yeah.
the game where he's the featured back. Like, let's see what you can do. It's indoors. We know that there's all the different turf concerns right
Right.
now. Then is that why you're out here slipping and sliding like it's the 90s and you about to go hit the slip and slide? Does someone just get the water out
The
and just start spraying
90s.
it on the little mat for you to just run down and slide? But like it
So good.
I
Yeah.
don't know. It's maddening to watch it because like you
Right.
mentioned, he's a bigger guy. So when you're seeing them in, third and two, third and three, second and third, you're thinking like we should be able to get this pretty easily. But instead, he's falling down before he's able to get, put a hit on anybody else. He's just losing his balance. It's not looking right. And I was trying to see like, is the offensive are there holes not there? Is it something with that? And it didn't seem at least, and I didn't rewatch the all 22 yet. So it's
Right.
like, it didn't seem from my angle at home watching the broadcast view that it was like an offensive line problem primarily. It was just kind of like, it wasn't working right. Like, I think it was such an entertainer was talking about Luther, like the curl just didn't earl all the way right. Like it just didn't come all
That's
to
so
it
true.
just didn't come together with
Yep.
AJ Dillon there. And
Yep.
it's maddening to watch it because he's a player profile that
Well,
you would
because we've
think
seen
would.
him do it. That's what's so
Yes.
frustrating and so
Yes.
bewildering. Is yeah, last year definitely a disappointing season. I think AJ would
Mhm.
agree with that. And you thought, okay, reset, take the off season, and then come back and ready to truck some fools. And through 2 weeks, it just hasn't been the
Not so
case.
much.
And I think, he didn't get any favors done last week in Chicago from the offensive line, but I thought there were plenty of opportunities yesterday in Atlanta that he didn't take advantage. He just didn't take advantage of. And it sucks because I'm not saying that like he's a terrible player or anything like
No.
that, because there are plenty of plays that you can point to yesterday, whether it is running for hard yardage or catching something out of the backfield and making a nice gain on first down. Like there are plenty of plays you can point to and go, okay, that's AJ Dillon. But man, it does seem like when the chips are down and you need that play, he is not the one to get it to you. It's frustrating.
Yeah,
It's
and it
frustrating.
just it made you say like, man, I hope Aaron Jones isn't hurt for too long. Like, I hope that hammy is not a very severe tweak, but I'm always very nervous when guys are having hamstring injuries. Like, those tend to linger.
Well, that's
Calf,
why I got to think he's out for at least another week. I mean, look
yeah,
at Christian Watson. He
yeah,
injured his in practice 2 weeks ago, and he's still out. I got to think. I mean, every injury is different. I understand they have all the medical information, but I'll be shocked if Aaron's back against the Saints, and that's what's kind of troubling. And at the same time, okay, here's the thing: if Aaron Jones plays in that game, the Packers win going away. So
mhm,
there's that, right? Like I have zero doubt of that. Also coming off of both Aaron being out and AJ's performance, you start to think back, that Jonathan Taylor
right.
conversation starts to make a little sense because Aaron, he always seems to get dinged up. He's in the last kind of viable year of his contract. AJ's in the last year of his deal.
Hmm.
The Jonathan Taylor thing, I don't know, 2 more weeks, then he's off the PUP.
Yep.
Do they restart those conversations? I think if AJ continues to play like yesterday, I think that's a conversation maybe the Packers pick up that phone again.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see why, because when you watch Jonathan Taylor, like, what a talent. The
Right.
thing with Jonathan Taylor, though, with JT, it's like, it's some of the injury questions as well, where it's like, this is
True.
part of why the Colts are probably hesitant, because it's like, we know what you can do when you're on the field, but you spent some time, on the sidelines, not able to actively help our team win. So it's one of those things like, are
Especially
you
last year, yeah, definitely.
right? Are you going to go out and invest all this money into a Jonathan Taylor to come to Green Bay? Without understanding, like, the injuries might pop up with him as well. And if both him and Aaron Jones are injured,
Then we got Emmanuel Wilson, baby. Let's go. Let's
it's
go.
Patrick
Run him
Taylor.
out
Yeah,
there.
it's like,
Let's do it.
hey, that's what your options will be then. But so it's like, is the reward worth that risk of what the health might be for him on this team?
We'll see. Like I said, it's a couple weeks away. Maybe AJ turns it around and this becomes like an afterthought. But he's a premier talent, and I
Mhm.
think it'd be nice to pair him with Jordan Love in the backfield. Who Jordan Love, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, leads the NFL in passer rating at 118.8 and passing touchdowns with 6. It's like that Paul Rudd meme? Look at us. Who thought we'd be here? Like Jordan Love balling out. Like I understand there's things you can nitpick. I certainly want him to start a little faster.
Mhm.
Definitely want to see a little bit more production there in the fourth quarter when he had moments. But man, this kid came out just gunning it. And I love kind of this so far so good, launch, so to speak, of Jordan Love as the starter because he is playing some lights out football.
Absolutely. And then when you look at his stats from the Atlanta game, we got to keep in mind he had those two really big pass interference plays too. So,
All right.
like, the people were harping on the yardage that Jordan
Right.
Love is racking up, but I'm like,
Right.
okay, there could have been another 80 yards, 80 plus yards there if
Probably, yeah.
we didn't get some pass interference calls. But I'm encouraged from seeing his play early on. I was encouraged seeing his post game press conference where he's like, hey, that failed quarterback sneak, that was my fault. Said the wrong word. And you can see on his face, like, he was upset with himself, with the
Yeah.
team. And you like to see that from your quarterback. You like to see them taking accountability. You like to see them saying, like, hey, like, I'm gonna keep working and getting better at this. And when you're saying I need to get better at my role, at my position, but you're already doing good.
Well, you're already lights out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
that's the piece
encouraging.
that's encouraging, where you're like, I like where this is going. Like, you see the flashes, and like you said, of course, there are moments where you're like, this didn't work out exactly how it would. He missed Dobbs, wide open, where you're like, okay,
Right.
gotta reel some of these things in. But at the same token, it's like he's playing well with more room to grow in his first year as a starting
That's what's
quarterback.
crazy. And what's so refreshing, I think, is how in rhythm he plays. Like
Yeah.
he is just he's got the read, I got my dump off or it's time to run, right? And most of these balls are being delivered on time in the rhythm of the
Mhm.
play. You know what I mean? And hey, sometimes that bites him. I think he missed a few early on where he was probably trying to rush things a little bit. But yeah, I think it was just so encouraging to see him again another week. He's running the offense, he's hitting the things he should. And I'll tell you what, my favorite play of the entire day was when he busted off that big 30 plus
Yes.
yard run, and then that lineman kind of hit his head on the way down, and he gets up chirping. I mean, he didn't hesitate. He got right in guy's face, and I freaking loved that.
Same here. It was so funny when that happened because he started chirping, and to me, it seemed like the defense, like, he didn't expect Jordan to say anything.
No, he
Like,
didn't at
he was getting up to
all.
walk
He
away,
was, uh huh.
and here comes Jordan talking that talk,
Yep.
And the line, he turned back like, wait a second. Like,
You're a quarterback talking to me?
like me?
That
You
was
talking to me
right.
like
He
this? And
kind
it's
of
like,
started to go after him a little bit too. I'm like, what are you going to
yeah,
do? What are you going to do? What are you going
I
to do to the
love it.
quarterback after the play? Come on.
I love it. I love that energy from him. Like I saw people like he needs to learn how to slide. I'm like, that's the he's
Man.
young. Like that's part of it. I know he wanted to
Yep.
truck some people in the preseason.
Yes, he did.
That's part of it. And as he continues to get older, he'll figure out situationally where to slide, where to run out, if it's worth taking, the extra hit to try to get that extra yardage. But
Right.
it's encouraging to see. And the other thing with Jordan Love that make that kind of was like interesting, like going into the fourth quarter, how many people already believed that he could take that team and put them into a winning position?
Yep.
Now there were some people who were like, well, I guess y'all ain't got 3 Hall of Famers now because he failed in this. And I'm like, it's a drive, whichever way it would have went. If he would have been able to lead them down the field on a game-winning drive, or the outcome that we actually do have, where it's an L, you take everything. You got to be. You can't go overboard
from a
limited sample size.
You continue to grow, and it's like, of course, the talk radio world and first takes of the world will try to frame it as one thing or another. Like, oh, he's clearly not up to it. Like, it's his third start. It's his first opportunity at a game-winning drive. Like, let's just relax. It's funny though that you bring up, the belief. Like, Jordan went out there, right, and it was kind of like, okay, he's been playing really well today. I believe he can do it. I'm curious as to your thoughts when things start to tighten up there late in the game. Where are you on Matt LeFleur? Because I've seen a lot of conversation around, and I've had plenty of people chirp at me both on Twitter and in my inbox regarding, another blown game by Matt LeFleur. Oh, Matt just puckers up, and Matt completely the moment's too big for him. And I got to admit, I never have that feeling watching the game, but I do wonder, like, what your perception is as far as do you feel that, like, when the Packers get into these late game situations where the tide seems to be turning, because it's not a Matt LeFleur thing. Like, this is a football thing, right? Like, Mike McCarthy had it happen in Seattle very famously in 2014. Yeah. Like, no doubt it happens in the game of football, but I do wonder where are you on Matt, because like I said, there's not an inconsiderable amount of the fandom out there that feels like Matt's great when they've got a lead and they can, like, get after the passer, so to speak, on defense and blah, blah, blah. But a game like yesterday where a team is pretty damn physical, and I think we've seen this against Detroit these last couple of years, like, it's never out of reach for the opponent, and Matt his teams seem to kind of freeze in those big moments.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of my feelings towards former Bucks head coach Mike Budenholzer, where there were a lot of people in the Fire Bud camp. He's terrible. Get rid of him. Doesn't do anything.
I don't even follow the Bucks, and all I saw was Fire Bud on game nights. My own Twitter feed.
And I see similar between Matt and Bud in the sense of where it's like, yes, they do things from time to time where you're like, why? Like, what was why this decision?
Right.
Like, this is one where you're like, this is questionable. This probably cost the team. It could have cost the team here. But a lot of it, I'm kind of like, some of it's on the players where it's like, I'm putting you in these positions, but like, you have to execute here. We're not even having some of these Matt LeFleur conversations if Jock catches that interception, if Quay catches the interception, if Dillon doesn't trip at a few first down opportunities. So I'm not saying that Matt LeFleur is without blame, because he did have some questionable calls. Like, why didn't we kick a field goal to start off the game?
And it blows my mind. He was asked about it at the press conference, and he's like, it's a real long field goal. He kicked a 52-yarder outside last week.
Or no, 52. Yeah. So it's like,
what? Like, that blew my mind. I didn't get that one at all.
It's those moments where you're like, Coach, what?
What are you talking about?
Like, why that decision? But like, overall, I don't think that Matt LeFleur is a coach that is going to be detrimental to the team's success in all phases, where it's like, he has to go because we can't win with him. I think you can win with Matt LeFleur. It's just like, he's still figuring some things out. And the other part,
especially on offense with
a new quarterback. And that's the other piece to it, because for the past, since his start here with Aaron Rodgers, there were a lot of questions around what's Aaron and what's Matt.
Yes.
And now that we have Jordan here, it's going to be a lot clearer to see what is Matt, like what is happening here, which pieces of this is of him. what was of Aaron, what is now of Jordan. So it's a time to kind of figure things out. But like, I think he can be better. Yes, he can make some better decisions. But I don't think that he's a terrible head coach or the Packers need to get rid of him to win.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Now, Joe Barry, we'll talk about that next week. We'll talk about that after the Saints come to town, and we'll see how they fare, because I think the Saints are a team that wants to throw it. We'll see them tonight on Monday Night Football, but they're a team that I think is going to want to push the ball down the field, and I do think that plays to the Packers' strengths on defense. But you never know. Joe Barry may go, hey, soft cover 2 all day. Let him go.
Hey, back off, everybody.
We'll
10 yards. 10 yards.
Don't get Camille. Don't get me going again. I just calm down. It was so good. I cannot thank you enough for talking to me every week. It is such a joy, Camille. I really, really appreciate our chats, and we'll be back next week. In the meantime, tell the folks where they can find you here online.
Yes, so the Technical File podcast, we record live every Tuesday on our YouTube page. So make sure that you come and join us, be part of the show. If you can't catch us live, the episode is available on YouTube immediately after we finish recording, and it's available wherever you listen to podcasts that Wednesday. So Wednesday, it's always a new episode of Tech File. And then Locked On Bucks, you can catch me over there. I was on Friday's episode, and nice. I'm picking up the weekly appearances over there as well. So that one's more of a subscribe and check in to see. Right. But I'll be making my weekly appearances on Locked On Bucks.
I also have to say, I noticed some Carry the G beer in the Technical Foul podcast last week. That's what I'm talking about.
Let me say this, because I'm not even a beer drinker. I know Wisconsinite doesn't drink beer. I understand. Right. I'm not a big drinker as is. So my husband saw the Carry the G out, and he's like, I want to get this for you guys when you record your podcast. He's like, it'll be funny to make the Bears fan Ken drink this
right
after the L. And again, not a beer drinker, but that's a really good beer.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you like it.
I was drunk halfway through the can.
Well, yeah, it's a serious beer. Like it is. That is a no joke beer. It will get you going. There is zero question about that. Camille, I can't thank you enough. Really appreciate you. I'll talk to you next week right here on Carry the G in MKE.